Hey folks, it's Nick Granville here. I'm just doing this quick YouTube video to talk about comping. I realized comping is such a big subject, so I put it out to my Facebook page and said to people, what are some topics you want me to discuss? So I'll try and cover some of those today. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do subscribe below. Give us a like and leave me any comments if you've got some things that you want to know further about this. Then hopefully I can answer them below. Also, I'm going to try and do a weekly thing on YouTube, and I've been doing some stuff on a weekly live on YouTube and some weekly stuff on Facebook and all that stuff as well, because none of us are playing gigs now, so we might as well be doing this stuff, so I'll have more time for it. Anyway, so comping. What is comping? It means to accompany. So the first thing I'll talk about is how to fill out the harmony. So when you're playing in a trio, one of the big things is you need to kind of cover the harmony as well as the melodies and any other things that might need to be taken care of. And one way I really like to fill out the harmony is I like to play two-note chords. And you'll see this the whole way through the lesson. Two notes seems to be pretty good. And the reason for that I like two-note voicings is that your bass player plays the root note. Say we're in D major like I just was. You have a D, right? And then your chords, if I play an F sharp and a C sharp, I'm playing two notes and I'm spelling out that chord, a D major 7 in this instance. I don't need the fifth. The fifth is kind of power chord like, but also it's contained in the harmonics of the note, every note anyway. It's another day. But that basically gets the point across. So all I needed to play was that. Now sure, that's a fifth, but it's not a fifth of the chord. So that's my major voicing to D major 7, D minor 7, so D, F and C, and then D dominant 7. And all chords can be broken down to that. Now what I do with those chords, I really like doing them on the D string and the G string. So if I have a D minor 7 chord, I could go like this, right? Right, D minor 7, G7, 2, 5. Or I could go. Much hipper. Now, if you're playing that underneath a soloist, those kinds of voicings work really, really well because they're not going to suggest too much to the soloist. And the soloist could be someone playing the melody, it could be someone playing a solo, it could be whoever's leading is basically the solo at that moment is the soloist. So I really like that as a way to fill things out. Now from there I can add extensions to that. So if I have that D minor, I can add the 9, the 7, the root, the major 7, whichever, particular 6 in the major 7, whichever. And that's a really good way to fill out your comping when you're playing in a band, because you can have things like so you see there now, you can imagine with the bass player playing, and amongst that, it's actually, I'm kind of covering two things at once, the soloing and the comping. And that's a really good way to fill out your comping. Another way to fill out your comping could also be to put a chord underneath occasional chords. Now you don't want to do it the whole time because that gets into chord soloing, and that's a whole other topic. But you could do it in a sense like this. So if I have a melody like this, I might go. So I harmonize the last 3. And I harmonize them in fourths. If you're not sure what that is, I think I've got a lesson somewhere on fourths. If not, have a look around on YouTube, there's heaps. Or you could just go. So I just put 2 chords in, or I just voice the last one. And that's a really good way to kind of fill out things as well, again, in a trio, because you've got the bass player playing and the drummer playing. And so there's a lot more room for you to play chords in that instance. Now, this is a big one. This is where a lot of people go wrong. There's kind of a couple of different approaches, and all of these approaches will not work all of the time. You can't just say, here's my comping idea and I'm just going to slot it in and it's always going to work, because it doesn't. Every singer is different, every musician you play with is different, and they want different things from the music. And it's your job to try and figure out what that is. So a lot of that's experience, but it's also kind of having a concept for how it works. So that one good concept to have behind working behind singers is a concept of how to voice chords with the melody on the top. So I use Summertime as an example whenever I do workshops, and this is a really good tune for this. So I'll play you Summertime. I'm just going to play the chords. I'm not going to play any melody at all, but you should be able to hear the tune. See, here, there, I was playing the chord progression behind Summertime, but I'm putting the melody on the top. Yeah. So I should preface this by saying is you always have to know the tune. This is one thing I hate, that when I work with singers and they just give you a chord chart on a tune I don't know, so they pull it out on the gig and they go, oh, do you know this tune? And they pull out a chart and then it doesn't have the melody on it. To me, it's missing like some of the most important bits that I do need to know. I want to know what the tune is, like what's the melody going on here so I can support it properly, right? So looking at that, how do we work on those? Well, you've got to work out which notes you want to put on the top of your chord to start with. You don't need to play all of the notes, just the key ones. So with a tune like Summertime, it goes da do da, right? I don't need to play all of that. If I just go, I'm playing the note that's happening twice. Therefore, any singer worth their salt should be able to find that. Now, if the singer can't and you've given them that much, well, it's probably not your fault anyway, and there's not much you can do in that instance. Some singers don't need this too, by the way. They don't need you to play all these melody notes. So in that instance, you'll know quite quickly whether they need it or not. Some singers, it can be really inhibiting if you're playing the melody all the time, because then they can't develop it and go places, but it's a judgment call, right? Anyway, so that's and then the next part of the melody, dum da dum, right? Now I don't need to play the fifth underneath, because any singer should be able to go from D down to an A, a fifth below it, with the chord, without me needing to give them that much. Da do da. Now, I'm not a singer, by the way. I hate singing, I hate my voice, but it's more just, this is a really good concept to have if you're going to support a singer. Now, sometimes you want to do this, sometimes you don't. What do you do if you don't want to play the melody that they're going to do? Well, one thing you can do that's really, really helpful is to just give them a chord where you're playing essentially a harmony to their melody. So, for example, if their melody note is an A note, maybe you'd play an E note on the top of your voicing. So you might go. So you see there, I was picturing how the melody goes in my head, and then I'm playing a harmony note to it. And a lot of singers really like that, because it's a very supportive way of playing. So that's another way to accompany a singer. And a third way I'd say too is you could also play the gaps of what the singer does. So the singer goes da do da bum dum dum ga dum ba ba do ba dum bum bum da do da ba ba do da do do ba ba da. So so on and so on. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm not a singer, as I said, but I'm playing the gaps around the voice, and I'm trying to think supportively with it. I'm not trying to play exactly what they play in that instance. I'm trying to play something that complements to it. And again, I'm being very, very careful about what my top note of my chord is. If I play you this chord, the note that sticks in people's minds is always the top note, mostly. So that is going da-dum, or G to F. And so that's a really important consideration, is what is my top note? And that's a lot of the time what I'm thinking of when I think about voicings and how to do them. So to recap, with dealing with when playing with singers, I want to be able to play the melody on the top of my chords where necessary to be able to support it. I want to be able to play a harmony to that melody note so that if the singer doesn't need me to play it, then they've got that. And also I want to be able to play the gaps around it. Okay, now duo playing is a little different. Sometimes playing in a duo, I'm not playing with a trio, so I've got no bass player or no drummer or whatever, or any other musicians in the group. So therefore I have to cover a lot more. So sometimes I'll play the bass line. So that's bass line and comping. I've got a lesson on YouTube already on walking bass comping on guitar. Check that out if you want to know more about that. Sometimes I'll do that, sometimes I won't do that. You don't want to do that all the time or it just becomes samey. So sometimes I'll just do, regular kind of comping and leave it up to people to fill in the rest in their mind, because you don't always need to make things so obvious. Sometimes I'll just play like Freddie Green type stuff. So again, it's all context and no one rule applies all the time. The important thing is you must listen to what's going on around you and react supportively. And that is the key thing. Now, one more thing I would say with working with singers is the more you can think of the bigger picture, the form of the song, the more the singer is going to like you. It's pretty obvious, really, but a lot of people don't think about that. If it's 12-bar blues, try and think of chunks of 12 or even 24, right? For the first two choruses, maybe I'm going to do this, and then the next chorus I'm going to build up with the singer, if that's where they're going, and the next chorus is coming down, and you're giving the music some shape, and you're helping them to tell their story by doing that, especially on ballads, because if it's a 32-bar form ballad, you need to be supporting that form, and I think that's really critical. Right, comping for bass solos. This is a big one. Wes put some comments on this on Facebook, and I thought it's an interesting thing because a lot of bass players have a love-hate relationship with this. No bass player ever wants 10 notes on there if a piano player is comping underneath or a guitar player is comping underneath. 6 notes under a bass solo is too much, always. There's very few opportunities where that G minor voicing would ever work in a bass solo, so just don't go there. Most of the time what bass players want is they want you to kind of play supportively but not get in their way, because you've got to remember with a bass it's a lower pitched instrument typically. Now of course you get 6-string basses where people can play up high and all of that, but it's a lower pitched instrument, so in order for that to cut through we have to think about our texture and our chords and all those sorts of things so as to allow the bass player's voice to be heard. So what I would say about that is what would be really useful to a lot of bass players is for the person accompanying to think about contrast, right? If they're playing low and they're playing things like I'm using an octave pedal there to simulate kind of the register of where a bass would be. But if they're playing down there, well, there's no point me going... that's just going to clutter the whole thing. So one way to contrast that could be to go... So they've got this register and low, and I'm playing up here, and I'm playing just 3 or 4 notes. See, I got 3 notes, maybe 4 at times. And I'm leaving a lot of gap behind that. Maybe it might be useful to do something like a go. And what the question I'm always asking is, what needs to happen here? If I'm feeling the time wavering, like the tempo's slowing down or speeding it up, then my job is to lock it in along with the drummer and anybody else who might be playing on the gig. If the tempo's feeling really good and the bass player is soaring, and I may not need to do anything, sit out for a chorus and then come back in. Again, that comes back to that bigger picture thing. So what is needed here? So a bass player friend of mine really likes it when I play Freddie Green parts under his solo. So if it's a blues, now, the Freddie Green stuff is not so great on a solid body guitar like this, but you get the point. And the thing with that is that supplies all the harmony that he needs, but more than anything, it supplies the rhythmic push that the music might need, and that's important too. That same bass player friend of mine, he often complains that he's playing for everyone else's solo, then when it comes to his solo, all the balls drop out of it and all the energy goes, and it goes down to this really soft, whispery thing. And that's not what he wants at all. He wants some energy as well. He doesn't want you to overtake his solo, but he doesn't want it to drop away to nothing. And so that, and again, a situation, he may really like that Freddie Green style comping, and someone else might hate it. And you will tell straight away, because you will tell if you're interrupting someone else's flow. And so you have to reassess it and kind of look at it and go, well, what's going on here and what do I need to do? And that's what I'm often questioning and answering. Right, an important thing that I think with comping is really nice is counter melodies. Now, this is something my buddy Chris Kane does a lot, who's one of the great compers around, in my opinion. And Chris, because he's a singer a lot of the time, when he's singing, he tends to not play guitar all that much. Sometimes he will, but a lot of times he'll just sing for a bit and then he'll play guitar for a bit and then sing for a bit and play guitar for a bit. Kind of like B.B. King did. And you can hear that in Chris's playing, that he's checked out a lot of B.B. King. So what he does is, if we're in the key of A, this is one that Chris does a lot. So that's just A and C sharp, and we're moving up to B minor, C minor, C sharp minor, but all over an A chord. And he'll do variations on it. And he doesn't do them all the time, he just does them every so often. And it's really nice because it's a way of comping and outlining some harmony, but a way of creating this counter melody to what's going on. And it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with the particular tune, but it has to support the particular tune. And I've noticed Chris has like a bunch of them worked out. So for homework, I'd suggest going and listening to some Chris Kane and check out, maybe just pinch 4 or 5 of those off how he plays them, because he really is great at it. And so take them, learn them, and go, okay, well, these are the ones that he's doing. What can I do with this? Right, so here's a big one. I'm just going to briefly talk about this topic because this could be a whole lesson in and of itself. Colla Voce. So what does that mean? That means playing rubato and out of time and floating on it a bit. Now, interesting thing is it doesn't really mean out of time. That's what a lot of people think, and it kind of does, because there's a flow to the music, and that's one of the key things when you're playing behind someone who's playing Colla Voce, is that you go with where their flow is. Now, how do you get to that point of knowing what their flow is? Well, the first thing to do is to listen. So if I'm playing with someone and the time drifts away and it starts going free, then I just won't play to start with, and I'll try and figure out what they're trying to say. What is this person trying to say musically? Well, okay, maybe they're trying to say something that's really angry. Okay, well, I need to support that with angry too. No point playing something that doesn't fit. Right? And then I don't necessarily try and play the gaps. Sometimes I'll try and suggest things to them. Sometimes I'll try and play things that go with what they're doing. But the key thing is I'm letting them lead, and I'm trying to support their story, whatever that might be. So an interesting thing with Colla Voce is people think it means don't play time, but you can play a sort of a time and sense. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to play something Colla Voce. So what I played there had a sense that there was kind of a tempo, but kind of not. I'm going in and out of it. And there's always some kind of flow. And as soon as you can identify what that flow is, you're on the right track. And the key to that is just trust your intuition. And I think the thing with Colla Voce, again, is to have a concept about how you're going to do it. So one thing you can do, you can play kind of padded things. And I've always done that with my first finger, and I just kind of roll it across the strings. Right, I've seen Larry Coons do that, and he has a different sort of way of doing it, but it's really cool, and I stole that from him. I steal everything from everyone. Another thing you can do is finger pick things. So there I'm kind of arpeggiating chords a little more and playing, maybe some little counter melodies or whatever. And every situation is different, so you have to be willing to assess what's going on and to decide what's needed. Another thing I would say with Colla Voce, so that's pads. We can also play arpeggiated chords. We can also play a little bit of groove. And the way I look at Colla Voce too, so that's another approach. And the way I look at Colla Voce is it's really a conversational type thing. Nobody likes someone who talks over the top of them all the time, do they? But conversation is a back and forth thing. And I think when you comp in that kind of setting, the thing with in a Colla Voce setting is that you can get more involved in it than you might do. And say if you're playing behind a singer. If I'm playing behind a singer, it's essentially their story and I'm supporting it. That's what comping means, it's to accompany. But in a Colla Voce setting, well, to me, it becomes a little more of a two-way conversation. And that's definitely how I look at it. Like I try and suggest something to that other person for what might be happening as much as I will let them. But there's definitely always a leader, but that leader role can shift. And that's really interesting. I played a bunch of duo stuff with Roger Mannins recently, and we really enjoyed it because we could go all kinds of different places. But again, to reiterate, you have to know the tune and you have to know the form and all that kind of stuff, or before you even get into this, or you're not going to get anywhere with this. So a couple of things to do with comping that I'll talk about now is long versus short notes. So if I play short notes, so there I was playing predominantly short notes, but if I put some long notes in between them, they become accents. And the good thing about playing mostly short notes is they don't clash with things. So I can actually play short notes and get away with a lot more. A good example of this is if I play E flat major 7, right? And the melody is an E flat note, but I have a D note on top of my chord, then I'm going to clash, aren't I? But if I sustain it, then it'll clash. But if I play it short, it won't. There's the note. It won't clash as bad, at least anyway. So I think that, keeping your notes short when you're comping really can make a big difference. And then if I play something like, that becomes more melodic and more like an accent. So I like to use a combination of long and short notes with my comping. Okay, so how not to overplay. This is a common problem for a lot of guitar players because we play an instrument where you don't have to breathe. You can just constantly play, and it's, unlike a singer or a saxophone player or something like that. And one thing I find that helps is to think like a singer or a saxophone player rather than think like a guitarist. In that I'll play things where I'd imagine where the breath's going to be. So I'll go back to Summertime. So you see there, I was like leaving deliberate gaps where someone would breathe in a phrase, you know. And so I find that's a really good way to not overplay, is to just in your head be thinking about where the breaths might be if you were playing a melody. And I am playing a melody when I'm playing those chords because I'm thinking about my top note of my chords as a melody, as I've discussed earlier. Okay, so one more thing, voice leading. So I use voice leading a lot. And all voice leading is really a way of connecting chords together in a way that makes sense. And there are some rules around it. And the most important rule that you need to know is that if you're moving a fifth, then the thirds become sevenths and sevenths become thirds. Be that a flattened third or a natural third, depending on the type of chord, it doesn't matter. Which type of chord you're playing, the rule still applies. Whatever the third is becomes whatever the seventh is. So if I'm on E minor 7 and then I'm moving to an A, that's a fifth. Now, E minor 7 to A is the 2-5 of the key, but it's the fifth movement. As opposed to, which could be seen as a fourth up or a fifth down. So in that case, my third is a G and my seventh is a D. So my third has to become the seventh in the next chord. And my seventh has to become the third. So that's what I get. And then if I move to the D chord, the 1 of the key, so 2, 5, and then 1, I get my seventh has to become the third. And my seventh has to, in that case, my third has to become the seventh. So it stays the same. So we get... Now I don't need to play the bass notes because the bass player will. And that's voice led through. Now, one of the other rules of voice leading is that if you play a D major 7, then an E minor 7, you want to follow the direction of the chord. If it's going up to E, you go up. And if you remember those two things, or if it goes down to C sharp minor, minor 7 flat 5, your voicing wants to follow in the same kind of direction. Otherwise, things can sound odd. Now, of course, these voice leading rules are there to be broken, but of course you need to learn them first before you can break them. And there's probably a heap of books around that you can check out about voice leading, but that's a big one when it comes to comping. I fielded some questions on Facebook and that led to this lesson, so I hope that it's been useful. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments section. Remember to subscribe to my channel, like this video, share it with people. You know, that's why it takes a lot of work to do this stuff. This is pretty much a day of my life, plus, you know, all the equipment and all that. So yeah, share it around and, you know, let me know that you like it. One thing I would ask though is that please listen to this record that I did. This is my reamped record that I recorded in Los Angeles with Ben Shepherd and Dylan Elise, who are Kiwis. We got together and we rehearsed for an afternoon, and then we jumped in the studio and came up with these tunes, and really proud of it. Now I realize people haven't got a lot of money at the moment, so this is actually free on Bandcamp. If you want it for free, go and get it. That's all good. The main thing is listen to the music. If you can afford to pay $1 for it, pay $1, pay $10, pay whatever you can do, but listen to the music is the key thing. And hopefully you'll hear some good comping on here, because this is a guitar trio, drums, bass, guitar. Anyway, reamped. It's on my Bandcamp. So yeah, anyway, take care, people. Look after yourselves and look after those that you love, and your neighbors and everyone else, and be cool. I'll play you out.